and articulate those out. I appreciate my brother for coming up here. We got a very special guest.
Perfect.
Greg, what's poppin'?
What's up, man? That Yachty have you going?
How's it going, man?
It's all right, man. It's highs and lows. As Clip
Indeed.
said, all things considered. We're gonna make it work.
Indeed, man. Super good to see you, man. All praises, you know.
You too.
We've been looking at this and going over it, and I gave them just a very acute intro, you know, about kind of what you do, who you are. I mentioned like you're on CNN more than a few times. Can you give everybody just a little bit of background if you don't mind?
Yeah. Well, pleasure to be here, man. Thanks again for having me.
Yes, sir.
You know, just background wise, I mean, I always joke, but I'm just a country boy from Virginia, man. I was someone who saw how, you know, Black folks in rural Virginia and rural America were being overlooked and forgotten about, and so decided I wanted to change things. And so I got into politics as early as college, and coming out of college, worked on the Obama campaign and ran his operation in North Carolina, and moved my way up the campaign and political ladder, and even served in the executive suite of the DNC. But while I was there, literally that same time, me and my cousins were out going. We had a bachelor party, frankly, and as we were leaving, a shootout happened, and I got shot. The bullet that hit me hit two arteries and nearly cost me my life. I got within like 26 minutes of dying, and I went through 6 months of recovery. And frankly, while I was recovering, I saw the same elected officials and politicians that I helped campaign for and elect, you know, turn a blind eye to this issue. You know, I'm literally in the room with crutches, and they're saying they can't do anything about this. And this was while there was like mass shootings and Sandy Hook, where you had, you know, frankly, little white children who were shot and killed, and they still wouldn't take action. And so that's where I decided to kind of pivot from like the campaign world and like the traditional political world, and really just focus on this issue specifically of gun violence and making our community safer. And so I worked at the city level for 5 years, built my way up. And then in 2022, really 2019 to 2022, really started working at the federal level. In 2022, we passed the first law on gun violence in 30 years. I was one of the big advocates and architects for that. It's the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And then when it came time to implement this big law that had, you know, $15 billion in it, all these major policy changes, I was recruited to join the White House to help implement it. And so I was part of the team that implemented that law, identified new solutions, and was the first deputy director for the first ever White House office of gun violence prevention. So seen it all, man. Been from rural Virginia, inner cities. I've been from the hospital to the White House, man, and really been focused on this issue for about the last 12 years now.
I was just asking people, what do they do? That's how you do it. That's how you get it done. Something that you advocate for when you have a passion and real life anecdotal experience. You actually bring that and say, okay, let me do something about it, man. Hey, man, I love you. I love you for that. Just, you know, the passion is there and there's a purpose. You know, we were actually just talking about the brother Akeem Toure, who got shot and killed outside of Yotel a few weeks back.
Yeah.
And I was actually a guest in Yotel at that time. We just kind of went through that story. The thing that is on top of mind now is just the administration, and I called it martial law. I think Big Aaron here in the corner put it a little bit better, but that's the only way I can see it. What is the experience? What is your thoughts on what's happening in DC currently?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, I live in Anacostia, so I'm in one of the neighborhoods that are being targeted. So just the other day, we were out, my neighbors, we had some oysters and stuff, was out chilling. And then you see Border Patrol, you know, big trucks and Secret Service and folks jumping out of vans and grabbing homeless folks. I mean, it is wild, man, what's happening right now. You know, I think what's really happening is this isn't about gun violence or safety. It's really about Trump taking control of law enforcement in DC. And
Okay.
here's a couple like reasons why we know that's true. You know, on 4th of July, he signed a big, beautiful bill. He cut DC's budget by $1 billion. which will lead to a 40% reduction in their law enforcement. He already terminated $800 million in public safety and violence prevention grants from the Department of Justice, right?
Hmm.
And he's also made a major cut to the ATF and even the federal agencies he brags about. Most of them, he made major cuts to their budgets because they're focused on gun industry regulations and gun traffickers and gun stores. And then in this
Hmm.
conference, he bragged about how he talked about how there was too many officers and that they're not tough enough. So he's bringing in his guys. So this is about him shrinking the local police footprint, tucking them under his control, and then bringing in his big boys from West Virginia and Ohio and from wherever, and so that he can have complete control. And it started with trying to get rid of undocumented immigrants. Then it pivoted to like homeless encampments, but now it's just outright targeting young black men, and they're literally walking up on people's porches and asking them if they're smoking what they're smoking. They're starting to do like old stop and frisk measures again. So it's pretty incredible, but they're really trying to change the makeup of the city, and using this military as an excuse to do that.
Understood. Now, when you say targeting young black men, are you saying because of the areas in which they police, or what gives you that sentiment? I saw a video
Yeah,
where you were riding by and there was a million of them on the street. I saw that video, but what gives you that sentiment?
yeah. I mean, right now they're patrolling high population centers like U Street. You know all about DC. U
Mm.
Street, 14th Street, for all of our listeners, kind of where most people dine and drink. And then they have targeted neighborhoods they call hotspots, and they're focused on neighborhoods like Anacostia, Congress Heights, Berry Farms, all that are historically black neighborhoods. And so it's not just. I mean, they also, frankly, they just grabbed someone off a food delivery scooter yesterday. I think off of 14th Street. They're hitting people on all angles, but when it comes to the residential areas, they are highly concentrated on black communities.
Gotcha. Okay, and then those are called hot spots, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
And
that's what police would call it.
gotcha. So they up there in Simple City and 50th, where you live, the whole 9 yards,
Yep.
Alabama. Hmm. And are they playing? They're not playing by the local police rules, then.
Well, that's the challenge. I mean, right now it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think the challenge is you got a lot of folks who don't quite know. I mean, in our community, they don't quite know the ins and outs of the law, right? Like, for
Mhm.
example, marijuana is decriminalized in DC. So you
Yeah.
think, okay, decriminalized, I can smoke wherever I want. Well, no, you can't actually smoke where you want. But you can own and you can smoke in your house. Another big thing, like if you don't pay your metro and you just jump the turnstile, if you will, that's
Yeah.
supposed to be a $50 fine. But they never thought of that as like a major, um, they never thought of that as like a major violation or a major offense of the law. They just thought of it as like $50 fine. I'll eat the fine if they catch me.
Hmm.
But now with federal law enforcement, man, they're cracking down. They see you smoking a blunt at the park, they'll put you in the back of the car and take you away. If
Hmm.
you jump the turnstile and don't pay the metro, they'll take you away. And so it's a mix of, frankly, like the community not quite knowing how severe these laws are, and if they do know that they're severe or not that severe, they've been used to kind of just speeding a little bit. The speed limit 55, you go 65, right? Like that type of culture where folks know that, hey, it's not a big deal, I can get away with it. But now you have a federal law enforcement that's cracking down extremely hard on the smallest infringements. And frankly, we haven't seen the worst of it yet because there's still folks coming in from other countries, other states. Excuse me. We got folks from West Virginia that were just announced as of this weekend that are coming, and so I think we're going to start to see more and more law enforcement coming in with this very hard-nosed approach to all forms of crime, and really pouring into neighborhoods that are, frankly, the least educated and least aware of what their rights are.
I see. I see. So the leverage has been there, but now it's being used. So every little thing, right? You can get someone on. We saw it with the mobsters, right? With the RICO, you get them on something small to get them in there, and then you really start to dig deep and dig down.
Yeah.
Mr. Fantastic, one of my co-hosts for this show specifically, he's actually a proponent of this because he's saying crime is so bad that you have to take these extreme measures, regardless of casualties, innocent casualties. He's saying that acceptable loss is what happens when you get to this point where crime is so terrible.
Well, look, I hear that argument. But look, man, if we think locking people up is the way that we solve crime, then America would be the safest country in the world. We incarcerate way more than any other country. Even if you look at states like Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate, but it's consistently been top 3 murder states of the country, right? Like, so we know that just simple cracking down, locking people up doesn't end this crisis, right? But we also know, on the other hand, that violence is real, that people are struggling. It is hard. Like, I'm going through it. I've lost family. I've lost friends. Like, I've felt it firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
So the real question is like, okay, well, what are our options? The good news is that we now know what works. So we have found that when you invest in community violence intervention, when you invest in helping survivors heal, when you also focus upstream in your accountability. So we do need accountability, but it's not just cracking the 16-year-old that has an illegal gun. We got to make sure we're cracking down on that 56-year-old white man who trafficked the firearms there, or the gun store that's been illegally selling guns for years and hasn't been held accountable, or the gun industry that's actively marketing guns to cause more harm, or not upgrading their product, like Glocks, for example. We know Glock switches are a really big problem, but Glock switches are already illegal. But if Glock just upgraded their design, then Glock switches wouldn't even be a thing. But right now, Glock says we're not doing that. It's not important to us. That's what criminals do, as opposed to being smart about enhancing their design. And so we know that when you invest in community, and when you hold the gun industry accountable, when you hold gun dealers accountable, when you start to put more accountability on how guns are getting to our communities, you can drastically reduce violence. And if folks don't believe that, here's the proof. So the last 3 years, we've seen a 31% reduction in homicides, and we've seen our largest reductions in major cities that have taken this approach. So you have places like Boston, only had 24 homicides last year. Newark, New Jersey, which we all know Newark is still tough. Newark is still brick city. Newark only has 8 homicides this year, right? Places like Baltimore, we talk about how Baltimore numbers are dropping consistently. Baltimore is now safer than DC statistically. No one would ever have guessed that in our lifetimes, right? But that's because they're employing these strategies. Miami, lowest numbers since 1956. Detroit, lowest numbers in 40 years. Every major city that's investing in community and starting to look upstream to keep guns out of their communities, like hitting the source, are seeing results. And so I say that, like, look, do we need better law enforcement? Do we need harsher laws? My answer is yes, but not targeted on individuals in poor Black and brown communities. But I think it's targeting more regulations at the folks who are profiting off of these legal guns getting into our neighborhoods.
Man, wow. So the interesting thing is, well, one thing that you said that kind of interests me, and it was a super chat. Shout out to my brother Joel. He was citing other places that have a whole lot of crime where this isn't happening. I guess the allegation is this is less about crime and more about control of DC and how DC is ran because it's so largely democratic. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Okay. So it's absolutely not about crime, because look, Trump was in Japan 2 months ago, and they asked him about crime in the US, and he bragged about how DC crime is down 35%. So he knows the numbers. He went from that bragging to now saying everything's terrible, everything's horrible, the leadership's incompetent, the crime's out of control. He's just using language to get what he wants. But if you look at the statistics, there's no reason why you deployed all this. If he actually was paying attention to statistics and really cared about crime the way that we think, then in 2021, when we saw the steepest increase in homicides in American history, the steepest spike when he was president, then that's when we would have saw the National Guard. That's when we would have saw all these big ideas. But no, right now we're on a downward trend, and he wants to deploy this. What this really about, I think, in my opinion, is 2 things. It's one, it's about this is an opportunity for him to seize power and control. But 2, it's also about one of his own getting beat up. I mean, there's no coincidence that there's video or pictures of his Doge Big Balls dude bloody, and now the next week all this stuff is rolled out. And so this is not based on numbers. It's not based on strategy. This is frankly just a power grab. And And I think honestly that attack on big balls is what kind of fired up enough to focus on it.
Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. Hit that like button right now if you can. That helps the channel the most. Mr. Fantastic, did you have anything? I saw you kind of gesturing and such. Aaron and Greg, I got a million, but I can call you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I could call you anytime. I want to see if they got, you know what I mean? Because I could text you. Hey, Negro, what about X, Y, and Z? You know? Aaron?
So, yeah, I did have a question. Do we think that he's exploiting the efficiency of the possibility of doing a power grab using these different police forces? And I say that because there is no state police to buffer the distance between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. The leap is quantum from one to the other. So, like if you tried to pull that here in the Commonwealth of PA, all right, you can minimize the forces of the police in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, our two largest cities. But then the state's going to come in before the feds are allowed to act like they're acting in DC. Do you think that he's using the proximity of those two enforcement agencies to his advantage? And do you think that can spill over into actual states and commonwealths where that's gonna be a lot harder to do?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is exactly why DC folks have been screaming for statehood for so long, you know, because we've been vulnerable to this. Like whenever we want to move a budget, Congress got to decide. But at any time, based on home rule, if the president wants to seize local law enforcement or local government resources in an emergency, right, whatever he deems an emergency, he can. And so, I mean, for lack of better words, I mean, Trump essentially is the governor, right? Like that's how he can move power-wise because there is no state infrastructure. And states have those protections and those abilities to say no or to say yes, like they don't have to adhere to, just like was it Connecticut, I believe, or no, Vermont, Trump said, give me your National Guards. And he said, no, I'm not doing that. You know, so states can decide, like they have those protections. DC doesn't have any of that. You know, we don't have a senator, we don't have a governor, we don't have members of Congress. You know, we're like a special group of folks who are here, you know, being taxed without representation. And it all seemed like politics until now, where he can just take law enforcement and say, y'all with me now. And our mayor has lost all her teeth. And so I think he's trying to test the grounds for how we can do it in other cities. He's already talking about Baltimore and LA and Oakland, and he's only targeting black cities, black mayors, to be frank. And I think if there's enough public buy-in, if people see this and celebrate it, and if he can win the narrative war, then I think he will try it in places like Pennsylvania. So I don't think this is the end. I think just policy-wise, it's very easy for him to use DC in this way to really make a case and start to tell the story of how this is how we keep our communities safe.
So, right. So I agree. And thanks for the edification there. Makes 100% sense to me. So I guess my last question would be, since he's successfully using DC as the pilot town, essentially, and that there's a future plan to target some more locally vulnerable cities and some cities that have a heavy black population, do you think there's enough time in his administration, the length that's left in his administration, to be able to effectively move that needle, or do you think it'll either die or be easy to reverse for the next guy to come in?
You know, I don't think any of us can afford to underestimate him.
Okay.
I mean, he's already implemented 47% of Project 2025, and it's, what is he at, month 8?
Yeah.
Right. So this guy is, he's tearing through that checklist. And look, honestly, I think this might be the least of our worries. You know, I think we don't talk enough about the big, beautiful bill and what that meant. He signed it into law, but the reason we're not feeling it yet is almost every major cut doesn't go into effect until the fall of 2026. So we're not going to feel the housing cuts, the employment cuts, the health system cuts until next fall, till after the midterms. And that was very brilliant of them to backload it so we don't feel it until elections are out the way. So I think he's stacking the deck to move as aggressively and effectively as he can. And so I don't think we can wait. I don't think we should be assuming that he can't pull it off. I think right now we have to win the narrative war. We got to create protections. We got to make sure that cities and states have what they need, the resources they need, especially if he starts cutting off money from them don't, listen to his approach. And frankly, I think we need to start thinking about the midterms and how we can build up a new army of folks to fight back in Congress, because we won't have the feeling in America will be probably the same next summer as it is now, because even no matter how crazy he is, a lot of people don't feel it yet, don't feel the pain yet. And I think that's by design. They're strategically backloading it so that they can get through this election, and then they can run up everything else that they want to do during his lame duck. So I think he definitely could pull it off, unfortunately.
Appreciate the edification. And I think the advice that I'm taking from that is simply, don't forget about the grenades that are going off in the here and now, but he's setting up pressure cookers, right? Mm-hmm. Things that are going to slow burn and going to show up later, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 6 quarters down the line. When you can stop them now, right? There's a low effort input now. Later on, the outcome is going to be. So, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Man. Mr. Fantastic?
Yes, indeed.
Brother.
Greg, these are my brothers, Mr. Fantastic and Big Aaron, man. I apappreciate you. Mr. Fantastic, what's goody?
Hey, man, what's going on, man?
Oh, pardon me. I need to have my professional. Mr. Fantastic, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How you doing? Mr. Jackson, how you doing there, good sir?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm all right, man. I'm Mr. Jackson, man. You have quite the you running for politics, brother? You go run for office, brother? You plan on it?
Maybe one day. I mean, I think that the reality is, man, everyone should be involved in politics. They say if you don't do politics, politics will do you. And so I haven't gotten there yet, but maybe,
man. Because I mean, you got the the Democratic playbook down pat, brother. Now again, most of the majority of everything you said is, Trump this, Trump that, all these different things, and we're not focusing on the actual issue and the problem that is the crime-ridden area that we all know. I think at some point in time back in the 80s, I think DC was the murder capital of the country, right? So when we look at the history of the city of DC within itself, and I don't understand why we keep trying to differentiate and say they're focusing on black areas and black this and black that when DC has always been predominantly black. So if a city is predominantly black, is the numbers say more likely than not they're going to police and going to have higher crime areas in predominantly black cities because it's mostly black people. But and shout out to you, brother, for surviving, the gun issue and so on and so forth. But clearly you are, I won't say anti-gun, but you're definitely not pro-gun. So I'll just ask you, are you anti-gun? Do you think we need guns as American citizens?
That's a great question. So look, I'm a gun owner. I grew up on a farm. My dad has 26 guns. I've been hunting my whole life. So I'm not anti-gun. But what I do realize is the risk of having a firearm in the home. And I also see this delusion that the gun industry has painted, that guns are the way that we keep our family safe. A gun is an offensive tool. It is your last resort, not your first resort. And right now we have a $7 billion industry that's marketing to you that everyone needs to have a gun on their hip to be safe. And look, Mr. Fantastic, I'm gonna be real with you. I got shot in the street, man. If I had a gun on me, I would have died, because if I had tried to defend myself versus evade, I would have been shot in the chest instead of in the leg, right? And so I think we have to realize that I can be pro-gun, I can be a gun owner, but I also can fight against this obsession, this delusion, frankly, that this is how we keep our community safe. Now, if you're talking about protecting ourselves from tyranny and a military, storming your house and taking your wife and children, that's a whole different discussion than just protecting your home day to day.
Yeah, that's part of it. But actually and statistically that more guns help and save people than.
No, that's not true. You're looking at the data from John Lott. John Lott has been debunked thousands of times. His last study was in the early 90s.
I'm not looking at that person specific. I mean, I've never heard of that person. So this is what I'm going to say, right? So for I think, how many gun deaths are there per year?
Right now, well, this year we're doing pretty good, but typically it's around 30,000.
So 30,000 gun deaths per year out of 300 million plus people. That's 0.01% or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, okay. Where are you gonna?
right? Less than 1%. So if we have 30,000 deaths, and I think we have 1 million some odd police officers, and we have hundreds of millions of gun owners, how do you say, therefore, that with 30,000 people dying per year, that's more than the people that own guns and deter people from breaking in their homes and from being robbed and from being things? I mean, where are you getting your data from?
So just to, the good thing, the sad thing, but the good thing about gun violence data, it's most reliable data you can find. It's life or death, right? And so when we think about this crisis of guns, you can compare it to how many people are alive and dead all you want, but in reality is this is the number one cause of death for youth. This is the number one cause of death for Black men under 44. This is the number one cause of death for all pregnant women. All pregnant women above childbirth complications is homicide by firearm. This is the leading cause of newly disabled Americans. This is the number 2 cause of death for Black women, the number 2 cause of death for Latino men. And so if you want to just throw this out there against how healthy every human on America is, that's not a real way to think about data. You have to think about what is the biggest threat to our public health. And right now, especially as a Black man, especially as someone who may have Black children or want to have Black children or have a Black wife or just have a child in general, this is the biggest threat to all of us. And so statistically, there are a lot of arguments. John Lott is the biggest, quote unquote, pusher of this research that guns make you safer. But in every single scenario, having a gun in the home does not make you safer from an outside threat.
But it's not just a home.
More risky.
Well, it's not just a home. I think here recently, earlier this year, 2 different mass shootings were stopped by gun carrying individuals. There's one in a church, and the other one was somewhere else. I think it was like a shopping mall or something, or whatnot, what have you, right? So again, like you said, we'll never have the actual numbers of how many guns people save because we don't report people that are living. We only report the people that die. So this is something that anti-gun, or not necessarily anti-gun, or people that aren't pro-gun use, because you can never prove how many people are living because they had a gun. I myself personally have I own a firearm since I've been legally able to own one. I've only had to touch my gun twice. And in those 2 occasions, I touched my gun, I promise you, saved my life, because the other person were reaching as if they had a firearm themselves. But being that I already had mine out.
Where do you live?
Well, I'm currently in Jacksonville, Florida, Duval, right, by the way. So
exactly. Okay, so that's the thing. That's the thing. In states like Florida, every state that has loosened their laws, that has encouraged everyone to have firearms, like Florida, we've seen the numbers go through the roof. And if you compare Florida to Massachusetts, you can compare Florida to Illinois, as bad as Chicago has been historically. Florida has much higher homicide levels. And you'll also have higher justified shootings. That's another challenge. If you ask any police chief, any police department, do they want less gun laws? They always say no, because it's so much harder for them to deal with a situation where everyone's armed. They might come in for a noise dispute. And if everyone got guns, it turns from, hey, I'm going to give you a ticket or turn the music down, to now I either got to shoot you or take you in. The other big problem is when you have states like that where they encourage the use of firearms, you have really terrible problems with stand your ground laws, where folks will shoot someone because they are afraid or they feel threatened. And that's not a life that I want to live. I don't know how it is in Duval for real. I'm not in Duval, but I'm going to tell you that I don't want to live a life where every altercation, every conflict, every discussion, I got to worry if someone's reaching for their gun or not. And in states like Florida, that's encouraged by the law. That's not encouraged by the law in places like Massachusetts and even New York and in New Jersey. And guess what? The numbers show it. New Jersey has 1/3 of the violence that Florida does with the same level of poverty.
Okay, well, again, that's the thing, right? So first and foremost, the guns aren't shooting themselves; criminals are, right? So that's another important thing that we always seem to. Well, the gun, it's not the guns just doing it, right? Now, outside of course, I'm gonna bring it up. I got you, brother. I know where you're going. Self deletion, of course, that's a major issue and problem. But those people, if they're gonna do it that way, they'll find another way to do it, right? But what we're saying is we keep blaming the gun and not the people that are using the guns. How is it not true? What's not true?
Just let's talk about suicide real quick. So 92% of people who attempt suicide only try it once, and they typically get treatment. If they survive it, they never try again. Total regret. But think about the success rate of committing suicide with a shotgun to your face versus a bottle of pills. It's a whole different ball game, man. And so you can't say that like they're going to just find another way. Like, yes, people can find multiple ways to do that. But when you look at the actual success rate, firearms are undoubtedly the quickest way for folks to lose their lives. And that's why when you look at suicide levels, the highest number of suicide is in these rural states, a lot of red states with the lowest amount of firearm laws. That's where we're seeing the steepest suicide. And these are older white men that are taking themselves out at crazy level. I mean, older white men are wiping themselves out at a almost equally alarming rate as we're seeing interpersonal violence amongst young black men. But we don't want to talk about it again because it comes back to, well, the guns didn't do it. But no, like when a person's in crisis, it's a big difference between them having some Tylenol and having a shotgun. And when it comes back to crime, you talk about how criminals are going to do whatever. When you look at, there's a report that's done every year on black victimization and how gun violence plays out. In the 90s, you might have been right, Mr. Fantastic. But right now, only 11% of homicides by firearm are connected to gang activity, and only 29% are connected to another felony. So what we're seeing is over 2/3 of the violence that's happening is between people like me and you. We in a party, we in the club, we hollering at the same girl. Maybe you took my baby mama, you stepped on my shoe, you done this, you disrespected my cousin. That's what's fueling the violence. It's people who have interpersonal conflict and happen to be armed. It's not part of some big crime ring. And so like you are just as likely to get into an incident as someone that you see on an episode of Power, because that's how violence is playing out in our communities. We are not living in this organized crime land that the media is trying to portray. The violence is being fueled as everyday people with firearms that are getting into small petty disputes. That's what the statistics are showing.
Yeah, but no, well, DC specifically, and again, they just did the thing where they showed all the people that were arrested. I think 4 men individually, I just covered this yesterday, were arrested in the process with narcotics with the intent to sell, right, by the imposition of firearms. Okay, so it's not just actually even using the firearms; it's having a firearm on you while already in another commission of another crime, right? So this is where we get to the point of where, yes, crime is the issue and the problem, and we want to keep running away from this. If you didn't have the children, okay, the men, the whoever that were carrying these guns, a lot of the times so illegally. We're not even talking about illegal gun possession, all right? And I'm not just saying because of strict gun laws or whatever, but felons, the number of felons that are caught with guns, that's an issue and a problem within itself. So the thing that we keep talking about here, right, is the guns are the issue. The guns are the issue.
Real quick on that piece, in March, Donald Trump signed an executive order to allow felons to regain their gun access. So even that piece is something Trump is trying to push. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, and that's a Supreme Court thing that just got, I think they heard that either last year or year before last. I understand that. But you still have to apply for that. And you have to get, it hasn't been approved yet. It's on and so forth. It's a push for people to get there. Once you've served your debts to society, right? And you've done what you're supposed to do and done the proper channels, I believe that's there, especially if it's like non-violent crime. Now, violent criminals, I think it may need to be some tweaks done to it because, that happens all the time. But outside of that, if you got a drug charge or whatever, and you have a felony for that or a felony for whatever, so on and so forth, I don't see why that should affect your ability to protect yourself and your Second Amendment rights. But the biggest issue and the problem still goes back to DC has been a focal point of violence, has his history of violence. And we can't just say Trump this, Trump that, Trump this, Trump that, when this was going on well before Trump was ever around. All right. Like I said, it just said last year, the numbers, DC had the highest numbers in 2023, I think it was, during Biden's thing, highest numbers, right, in the country, the nation's capital. So when Trump comes into the situation, because as you said, the mayor, not doing what they're supposed to do, the police chiefs and the police aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Well, we have this thing in the military called, hey, if you don't do your job, I'll do it for you. And when you have the higher ranking person step in and do it, you can't complain about the way they're doing it because you couldn't do the job you're supposed to do yourself. So look,
and I might agree with you on that. If Trump did not cut the budget by $1 billion, if he did not remove 40% of the local law enforcement, you can't kick somebody in the knees and then tell them run faster. You know what I mean? Like, and that's So I think like you might have a good point as far as like, hey, they aren't getting it done, so the leadership had to step in. But he also at the same time is crippling their ability to do anything, and he's doing that for all of us.
Well,
He
just quick
terminated.
interjection.
He's
Just a quick
terminating
interjection.
resources left and right. You can't defund a team and then expect them to perform. And you also like, so I think you're falling to the trap of thinking that his logic is aligned with numbers. It's not. His logic is aligned with power. This is not about performance.
Well, he only got 3 years left. He can never be president again. So that's why I can't follow your power narrative. I don't.
Well, I agree. He can't be president again. He won't even admit that.
So that the power narrative doesn't fit because he only got 3 years left. Okay, but going back to the original point, right? Of course, I'm going to cut the budget if you've been wasting the money. You waste the money. But you clearly the $1 billion you had, you're not using it for the purposes that it's supposed to be used because we have the highest crime rate in the country. So we're wasting money and overspending in something that you're not properly assessing to where it needs to be, and it's not getting the product that we need. It's not getting the results that we want. So yes, I'm going to cut the budget, right? Because you have a much higher budget, and DC is extremely small. What the hell does DC need more money than a New York City for? What does DC need more money than Atlanta for? What does DC need way more money than people that have much more population and much more to cover? So yeah, I don't see an issue and a problem with the point of cutting $1 billion. I didn't even know that police departments had $1 billion of budget. But hey, it is what it is.
I mean, there's a lot I can go back in on, but what's the budget of Duval County
total?
Yeah,
I promise you, not $1 billion.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just saying,
it's not $1 billion.
You act like $1 billion is like a small amount of money. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that's what I'm saying, though. I'm agreeing with you.
When you cut $1 billion, guess what that means? You got to shut down schools. You got to defund housing programs. You have to cut Medicaid and hospital resources. It's not just about a few less officers. $1 billion. That's a damn near third. It's a third of the budget has been wiped out. And when that happens, social services are the first things to go. They gotta fund the essential services. So this is not just like a small trim of like, hey, you gotta maybe chip away at this, maybe have a little bit less polish on your windows. No, this is something that will devastate that you acknowledged a Black-led and Black majority city. And to do that because you feel like they're not doing a good enough job with their strategy, like that is, I don't know why you even give Trump the credit to even understand their strategy. I mean, he barely wants to meet with the mayor, and he called her incompetent 1 week, and 2 weeks before that, he praised her for being brilliant and doing a great job. Like, this is not a logical, pragmatic approach of his that, hey, they aren't doing a good job. Let's cut the budget. Let's send in my people. No, man, this is about power, and I don't know how we don't see it other than listening to the words he's saying and trying to take them all for gold.
Nah, and my bad, I was wrong. Apparently, just checked it. Duval's budget is $2 billion. Yeah, but that means DC is probably like 5 or 6,
right?
And it's half the size. Duval is the largest geographical city in the country.
Yeah, but I mean, the reason our budget is so large is we also have to serve the entire federal government. Like, you realize that like we are in charge of managing everything that surrounds the White House.
Yeah,
you realize that, right? So like yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Hamp, if you want to.
Monuments and all that stuff. I understand it. That's what I'm saying. So monuments, all those things, DC, the beautification, buildings, and all this stuff, road work, and all this stuff. I understand that, but that's what I'm saying. So when you take away $1 billion, like I mean, cuts maybe need to be made. That there are points and times in where you need to cut the budget because there's overspending or there's wasteful spending that's being done. And I think DC was one of the hardest hit because that was one of the first places look for Doge. Right.
But I think that's what we elect our city council and our mayors to do. We elect local officials to assess, is this a good use of our resources? How are we prioritized them? Where can we cut? Where can we salvage? Having Donald Trump flying from Mar-a-Lago and tell us that we ain't running it right is crazy. He doesn't know these communities. He hasn't driven through these communities. He's never even walked through these communities. He walks in the White House and he flies out. He didn't even eat in the city. So I think, again, you're taking a very logical you're applying a logical mindset to a scenario where you have someone who has not shown any type of those logical steps. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be different. Like if the city was pushing it, if the city proposed it, if the city proposed it, it'd be different.
I just looked it up. So DC has a 19.7 billion budget as of 2024. I'm pretty sure y'all can make way with another 18.7 million, brother. I think y'all good to go. I think y'all good.
Okay. Well, that's your opinion. I'll let that you know. If you think it's cool to cut resources for Black communities, man, that's on you, man. I mean, I can't debate that. I think Black cities need as many resources as possible to thrive, and I stand on that.
Yeah, man, 100%. I appreciate you guys' civil discourse for sure. I think we kind of glossed over one thing. And Greg, let me know how much time you got. You know what I mean? We be up here for a long time. But yeah, there's one thing that really stuck out to me, right? Is the fact that the gun violence affects our communities, right? That's how Black men are dying. So the number of deaths, how they come, where they come, the ratio is inconsequential to me. The fact that it is us dying, it needs to be addressed directly. And we're talking about gun violence, and that's the demographic. You know? So Mr. Fantastic, I understood the retort, but I don't think it was maybe you can help me break it down more to understand, right? Because I know there's 360 million people. Gun deaths are 30,000, and out of 30,000, how many of them are us?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It would still be what there are more, of course, Caucasian people that die from gun violence, even though we have a higher rate. Once you get to the actual numbers, it's still more white people. You combine everybody else. So the point of it still is you're gonna have losses regardless, right? It's never gonna be a utopia to where no one, commits crime and no one dies from anything, be it guns, knives, whatever. If we go from here, we go look over in London, England. Yeah, they don't have guns, but they definitely getting busy with them knives. So what I'm saying is, we can't vilify, and we're the last standing, 2A gun rights or whatever, country. And like he said, the most important part, and I want to definitely acknowledge Greg for saying this, the 2A rights isn't even for self-protection and so on and so forth. It's for what he's talking about, just so President Trump can become King Trump, right? This is for the people to be able to fight for our rights and deny the government access of an opportunity to forcibly take over the people. So I think when we look into that, and then you look at less than 1% of the people that are victims of gun violence, I mean, I can't, I can't accept just from a mathematical standpoint. Hamp, would you notice 0.0 of your check missing? You wouldn't even notice it. If we lose 1.01 of anything, you don't even notice that.
So let me just debunk that real quick. I think when you talking about just deaths to population, that's one thing. But I had to dig this up. I wanted to make sure I was spot on. But in Rutgers, they did a study. They said 64% of Americans have experienced gun violence. So they may not be have killed or personally injured, but they either been exposed to it, threatened by it, or had to defend themselves from it. And so this is not something that's just like a small thing. Right now, 1 in 5 Americans know someone who's been shot or killed, Black, white, brown, whatever. And so this is not, it's not a coincidence that we see this on the news so much. This is a very present issue to every American. I mean, this is, even when you poll Americans for the elections, the top 3 issues are typically the economy, education or climate, depending on who you talk to, and crime or violence. Like, this is a very present problem. So I don't know. I think you kind of brushing it off like, hey, it's just a few people and that some blood needs to be shed. I think that's really insensitive. And I also think that, like, we can't afford to just say that it is what it is. We're the ones getting wiped out. It's Black men. It's young Black folks that are getting wiped out. So for us to just say, hey, that's just it, that's the cost of doing business in America, that means accepting our folks getting wiped out. Like, this is intensely impacting us. And we have found, and cities have figured out how to solve this. Like Newark, New Jersey, they only have 8 homicides right now. And for us to even see those types of numbers and be like, wow, like last year, Boston went down 72%. Like, we know how to solve this crisis. This is not something that we should just accept as our reality. But guess what? If we don't want to accept the solutions and the policy and the resources that can change things, then it will be our reality. But right now, folks have stepped in, leaned in, and they are making this rare and non-existent in their communities. So for us to accept that that's how America is accepting real defeat that I don't think Black folks can afford to take.
Well, no, and I'll just say this, then we move forward. As Hamp said, crime is as low as it's ever been, right? Overall, right? So we can't say and talk about this as big issue and problem when we're talking about DC. If we compare DC from the 80s and 90s to now, again, like I said, we have to look at it this way because it's a reality. It's not me just accepting and so on and so forth and being insensitive. It's me being a realist. That's why I said what I said. There's never going to be a utopic society to where no one dies, where no one commits crime, where no one does anything. Again, that's why I gave the example of UK. They've had mass, stabbings in other countries and so on and so forth. If you do not have guns, evil people will find a way to hurt people. So, and I just think that it's convenient and it's easy to blame the gun when it's not the gun. No gun is a real life damn Megatron from the Transformers. Guns don't just get up and create feet and shoot people. People do it. So we have to hold those people accountable, all right? And we have to talk about the people that are doing evil things with guns and not just the guns.
So there's one thing though I do kind of see, Mr. Fantastic, living in Texas, right? Road rage is different because everybody is strapped. Everybody does have a gun. You seen the New Orleans football player that got killed, didn't he? Was it? I forget his name. Damn. But because there's so many guns in these areas from people who can legally carry. So I see situations that normally don't escalate will absolutely escalate because people have guns. During the hurricane, when there was no gas, you seen people's fever pitch hit and then guns get flashed, guns get pulled. So I see that as a slight issue. But I guess, those are legally carrying people. Now, the one thing that this argument also kind of defeats a little bit, and let me know what you think, what all three of you think, is this black fatigue shit, right? Because if we're saying the crime, the gun violence is so minuscule, right? But then we turn around and we hear black fatigue about all the crime that's happening around us from young black boys, right? That doesn't reconcile with saying it's not enough people dying from gun violence and etc. Right? Those two things don't actually go together, right? It would have to be an issue with the gun violence, and then you can say black fatigue. But if you're saying it's minimal, but then I'm fatigued from black people, that's a contradictory statement. So it's convenient now. That's problematic for me when I hear it. That was for anybody. I'll just
okay. I'll have it. Oh, go ahead, Aaron. You got it.
No. I was going to Mr. Jackson or you. I mean, whatever.
Go ahead, Mr. Fidak.
Yeah. So now I would say it's still is you have to compartmentalize, right? So of course, like I said, even though it's 30,000 deaths overall, we have to look at as Greg said, okay, not being sensitive and take into matter, especially we're talking about the violent aspect of it. Who are the victims? Now, it was just grown people getting, deleted and whatnot, what have you. I don't think it would be much of a care. But when we have young toddlers, 3-year-olds and children and infants and old ladies that are victims of people that are just indiscriminately, shooting wherever. Hamp, you just covered the thing in Philly, right? Just, move it away from DC to where, you have these kids out here in the Greg, we talk about the switches thing, to where these boys that can't even shoot a regular firearm is now turning at something that wasn't intended to be a machine gun into a handheld machine gun. Yeah, you're going to have major issues and problems. So when the majority of the people that are involved in these activities are young black men, well, it's fair to say, because you're only assessing the criminal aspect of the gun usage and the innocent bystanders and fallout of it, versus just even the intended target. So that's why I think I agree with you on the part from, if we're talking about as a whole, 30,000 isn't a thing. But if we're trying to decrease the 30,000 to the lowest amount of numbers we can actually get it to, then we have to look at the perpetrators. And that's when it becomes a thing. And also, this isn't just an outside of the race thing. A lot of DC people are saying they're in love with this. They love it. They like it because they feel safe. They don't have to worry about these things and so on and so forth. So when we look at even what black people are saying about it, you know, forget all the white people and so on and so forth. I think it has merit and it has, you know, has weight to it.
Okay, yeah. And so I'm not living there anymore. That's why I thought it was uberly important. And then Greg is also involved. You know, I see the businesses suffering. That's one thing I do know. You know, like I'll be back in DC in a month or so, and the businesses, the club owners, the lounges, the restaurants, I know a whole bunch of them from being in that industry. They are suffering when since this has happened. You know, but go ahead, Greg or Big Aaron.
Go ahead, Aaron. I'll come back to
So
you.
yeah, so this is why kind of at the top of the show I had mentioned that one of my most important metrics is collateral damage, right? What's the percentage of collateral damage we're currently looking at? What direction is it heading? If it is changing, and to whom is it affecting? As a student of war, I've fully accepted and I'm acutely aware of the fact that bodies are going to hit the floor, right? It's just which ones are intentional, which ones aren't, and of those, which ones are most impactful, right? So yeah, switches being found on Glocks in the hands of men who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a shotgun is unacceptable, right? But I mean, people that you live by the sword, die by the sword, and your day comes up, your day is up, son, right? Even if at that particular moment you weren't the direct perpetrator or antagonist of the situation, the fact that you allow yourself to be in close enough proximity and you get taken out, I don't think that's necessarily worth, you know, cutting back on the fight against the actual antagonist. Distance yourself from danger as much as possible. The further away you are, the less chance of you being collateral damage is. But if we're mowing down kids at the playground, and grandmom's under an umbrella, I mean, that has to stop.
Yeah, and I think what's important to remember, like Trump is encouraging all of this. And I know people don't like to hear it, but like last week, the ATF decided they're not going to enforce their bans on machine gun conversion devices, which we just talked about Glock switches. They said they're not going to enforce it. And they actually started sending back all these devices back to the people they confiscated them from. Like Trump's son is on the board of Grab a Gun. He was literally a month and a half ago at the New York Stock Exchange celebrating the largest company of selling guns, which he wants to call the Amazon for guns. Like they are actively pushing firearms into the hands of as many Americans as possible. Even DC, they just shrunk the concealed carry process to go from months waiting list to like days waiting list. They want us to have as many guns as possible because they know they can profit from it. They know it's a narrative they can win. And it also creates a space where they can justify a bunch of these terrible situations. And what we know is that statistically, it does not make us safer. And I mean, every single state that has followed that same playbook that Trump's trying to push now have become more dangerous. And I hate to say that, but that's just simple math. And I think the last piece about the perpetrators, Mr. Fantastic talked about, we got to think about the perpetrators. Well, that's exactly what we were trying to do before. We were investing in youth-based violence prevention work, mental health resources for at-risk youth, working with families that lost someone so they don't retaliate, sitting bedside in hospitals with people who, after they got shot, to make sure they don't go back out there and shoot someone else. Those are what the dollars were invested in during the Biden administration, and that's the programs that Trump defunded. He even defunded law enforcement's crime gun intelligence centers across the country. He don't even want them to have better technology to track guns before they get into our communities. He terminated all these grants. And so we have a president who literally does not believe that policy can do it, doesn't believe that regulations can do it, doesn't believe that investing in community and investing in our young folks can change it. He believes that the way we solve this problem is law and order, crackheads, stop and frisk, go get them, jump out. And he's doing that in DC. And I think we cannot be misled to think this is about making us safer. And frankly, we're just replaying the same playbook they did in the 90s after the war on crime, right? When they incarcerated us at historic levels. That playbook is being played out right now in front of our eyes in DC. And I think we have a moment to push back before it's something that he pushes nationwide.
Do you think that the innocent people that are stopped and frisked, I mean, are they perishing at a rate that you would suggest it's worth stopping and frisking from catching the actual bad guys? Like, is there a benefit from more aggressive policing and actually locating, closing with, and destroying the actual internal enemy?
Look, statistics. We've already tried it out. We tried it in the '90s. We saw what happened. You don't end violence. You deter it. And what you do is you incarcerate black folks at historic levels. And so if we think the perceived if we think the feeling of fear or the feeling of safety is worth devastating black families all over this earth, then we're just accepting this fear of black folks as what we're trying to eradicate and not actually solve crime. I mean, so look, my answer is no. We've already played that out. We've already seen that movie. It failed. It destroyed black communities at historic levels. And now we're in a different era where we have a different playbook that invests in our communities that is actually outperforming crime reduction in the '90s. And we don't have to lock folks up in doing it. So my answer is no, it wouldn't work. But I'm sure other folks have different opinions.
What do you think law enforcement could do then in order to reduce the amount of crime that does exist? I mean, I understand that, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And going forward, there may be an easily outlineable plan to prevent things from happening and growing. But for the here and now, how would you propose at least law enforcement would be able to safely use force to eliminate that which has already been, identified as a bad guy?
It's simple. You just go upstream. You got to get to the source. Like, you can't just crack down on every teenager who found a handgun, right? Like, yes, we need to work on shifting their behavior, but how did the guns get there in the first place? And so I think that's how law enforcement should focus. That's what we were pushing the last few years. That's where we saw tremendous positive results. But like crime gun intelligence to trace guns after a shooting on where it came from, where the others come from, is typically very predictable. If you can find one gun store that's illegally selling guns or pushing them on the side, then they typically have been doing that for multiple people who've caused multiple crimes. So when you get upstream, you can see a direct disruption. When you disrupt trafficking, the trafficking network, frankly, that reduces the likelihood of firearms showing up in our communities. When you also shut down these companies that are creating Glock switches, right? Like the team that's shut down who's creating Glock switches, that was defunded by Trump as well. But we got to figure out all these things that are popping up in our neighborhood, how are we holding them accountable, and what are we doing upstream to stop them from getting there in the first place while we do the behavior change work with our youth?
Well, yeah, well, that wouldn't be something that he could stop on this side, because the majority of the Glock switches are produced outside of the U.S. They aren't there, and that's how they catch a lot of the people, is it being shipped in to see who it was. I think this dude, it was either earlier this year or late last year, he got caught with like 40 of them getting mailed to his house and so on and so forth. So even that, the ATF is responsible for shutting down illegal ways that those are being sold. So when I was there in the Biden administration, the ATF actually shut down 350 websites that were online selling these Glock switches. They were designed, camouflage them as like keychains and bottle openers, but we knew they were Glock switches. But we had a team that was in charge of disrupting those online sales. That team was defunded. That's what I'm saying. That's what the whole purpose of the ATF. They are focused on how do you keep these illegal guns from pouring into our neighborhoods, and that he has directly been under attack of that agency. He removed the director. There's only an active director now. He's trying to merge them with the DEA, and he defunded them.
Well, I think that would require a workaround, because at that level, you're also stopping or slowing down the amount of guns that are available to neighborhoods that they actually want to have their hands on these guns, right? I think that kind of, based on their intentions, you end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so they would never let that happen. But how do we, at a more local level, right, kind of gain control of the influx of guns in a way that circumvents the federal interest in letting guns into the country just where they want them to be? Because that's what they're doing. They're bringing them in, letting them go to where they want them to go, and the places they don't want them to go, they're going in there with hammers. So how can we replace the hammer in the neighborhood where the guns are going and having an adverse effect?
Yeah. Man, this is, And it's and the guns is the focus, right? And that's one of Greg's, and I'm saying one of his specialties, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking at it like, do you guys agree? Well, excuse me. The sentiment is that black neighborhoods are over policed already. Do you guys agree with that sentiment?
I would
No.
say improperly policed. I think we would need more police if their primary interests were the well-being of the neighborhood, and if the police were members of the neighborhood that had to sleep in the neighborhood, were from the neighborhood, right? That kind of policing I'm all for increasing, but the policing that's made available, I don't think it's a conflict of interest.
Okay, so you're saying people aren't policing their own neighborhoods. I agree
Exactly.
with that. I guess the sentiment is that they're over policed. So if you were to be asked that question, Aaron, for the majority to understand, would you say yes or no?
Yeah, over policed by the people that are currently policing them, which are not interested in their best interest.
Okay. Greg, you had a thought on that? Like are black neighborhoods over policed? Because that's the sentiment. You know, you see that verbiage a lot. So that's what I'm asking about specifically.
You know, I'm a torn on this one. I think my mindset is, what problem are we trying to solve? If we're trying to reduce violence, there are way more impactful strategies. You don't prevent violence by having an officer sit right there. You just deter it. You know, no one's going to, if they hot and they about to go shoot somebody, they just going to wait for the officer to leave, right? So you're not preventing the conflict. You're just deterring it. And if the goal is to reduce violence and reduce violent crime, then I think we have to get in the prevention mode. And prevention mode is investing in community resources, investing in at-risk programs, and investing in housing and economic opportunity. And so I think about my neighborhood, you know, the public housing, they don't even have AC in the building, right? Our street has potholes. The electric wires are dangling over the sidewalk. And so when you see so much dysfunction and lack of resources, but then you see 5 police cars coming up the street, you know, it's not necessarily over policing. It's like we are under resourced in these communities altogether, and then we expect police to be the band-aid.
Okay. So you're saying, do you think there's a larger police presence in black neighborhoods?
Definitely.
Okay. And but the issues don't get solved by us seeing the blue lights, right? The issue gets solved by, like what you're saying, like repairing the area, the comfort to the residents, the quality of life and living is an actual correction.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, you know, whenever every shooting, no matter how you look at it, it's a person in a moment of crisis and they got a firearm, whether they trying to harm themselves, harm someone else, they in a moment of crisis. And there's ways to reduce the likelihood of that moment of crisis. If you know you got a home to go back to and kids to take care of, you're not going to risk it all for this moment. You know, if you know you have air conditioning inside and everything is all love inside, you're not going to risk it all for this moment. If you have a job that you love and you're growing and you're advancing in, you're not going to risk it all for this moment. But right now, we have communities that have become powder kegs because they don't have the resources and supports they need. So you have people on edge. They in financial struggles, they in housing struggles, they got interpersonal drama, and then you put a firearm on their hip, right? And you throw them in the middle of situations, like they're going to act very differently than someone who has a lot to lose. And I think that's kind of the bigger problem is how do we give people resources to help offset what's bringing them to that moment of crisis? But right now we're not doing that. We're just saying, "Oh, y'all crazy," you know, and
Yeah.
that's our government approach, and I think that's a broken approach.
Okay. Desperation plus poverty equals crime for sure. Okay. I understand that sentiment. What say you, Mr. Fantastic?
Um, y'all know where I'm going with this, man. Listen, the police wouldn't be there if you didn't give them a reason to be there. There are plenty of black communities that are not over policed, that don't have a huge police presence because there's not criminal activity going there. Unfortunately, we have a lot of criminal activity in a lot of these black communities. Again, DC is the is the epitome of it historically. Okay. When you start looking at these things and just accepting that reality. And the point in the matter is we have more um boys and girls clubs and youth centers and all these things than we ever had when we were growing up. And yet what's happening? So this budget and the budgeting has increased greatly from what it was 20, 30 years ago. So I don't think we're dependent on the government to do something that the parents should be doing. Again, this is a at home issue. Why are your children out committing crimes at 2, 3 in the morning and they're in middle school? There's no way that your 13-year-old should have a gun in the first place and you not know it. Okay. My son would never. All right. Okay. And I have plenty of guns. Okay. He knows not to even look at a gun unless I give him authority to use it properly and for training purposes and so on and so forth. All right. God forbid, someone breaks in the house and he has to use an emergency situation. But, outside of that, I'm not giving him authority to do so. We keep trying to place the blame on everyone, but the blame who should be placed on. Criminals are the problem, not the guns, not the government, not the budget, not the whatever. It's the criminals. Okay. No criminals equal no police for the most part. Now you're going to have some police every now and again. But again, the exception is not the rule. For the most part, police are not going to be somewhere patrolling to where there's nothing to patrol. So if we start fixing this thing at our level, okay, we will have a tremendous overhaul of the issues and problems we're having with policing, crime, and everything else. If we just had these people raise their children and give a damn about the kids they're having versus just letting them roam the streets and do God knows what, and then blame the police when the police lock it, they love badasses up.
So you agree with Greg then?
I mean, he said he was torn. I mean, I think we definitely agree on a lot of things. But yeah, if you are not committing crimes, I mean, what are we doing? And then, like I said, the only thing I don't agree with is, and I understand it from his position and his experience in his career, right? He would see the budgeting and how these different things. And I'm not saying that doesn't have any credence, but I think there's a much more root issue to when we look at it beyond the budget, because money or not, okay, you deciding to go rob somebody, I don't give a damn how many billions of dollars been approved for the budget. A criminal is going to be a criminal. He's not going to care. The kid that wants to be out here and rob other people or gang bang or whatever, he's not going to care. And they've actually had situations to where, you had midnight basketball and things like that, to where the kids that were stopped, doing the purpose of it, had it ruined by still little badass criminal kids that wanted to shoot something up. So unfortunately, we're going to always have bad apples. I think again, that's not a acceptance or dismissal of Black life being lost and people being harmed, but I think it's reality. That's literally what it is, and you have to hit those bad apples extremely hard. You have to isolate them, remove them, and get them out of the way so they don't influence other children, right?
Yeah. Do you think the bad apples are more or less of the kids?
Clearly less, clearly, but there's a reason why we and people stop saying that. I think we need to bring it back. One bad apple spoils a bunch. Okay, one bad apple can spoil a whole bunch of good ones, but you can never put a good apple in a whole bunch of bad ones and they become good.
No, 100%. I'm just looking at it, right? When we look at this, I don't have a better term. So the martial law, right? But I guess before Greg got up here, we were saying that, we acceptable losses. So in order to find the bad apples, you have to expose the good ones, right? You have to imprison, arrest, accost the good ones. And I don't know if people understand this, but being subject to being in handcuffs, being in the back of a police car, being in a jail, right? Being confined, going through arraignment, being put on a bracelet. I don't know if we understand what that does to a psyche of a person. And I'm just not sure if the acceptable loss that happens when you police in this way is just going to blow over how we think it is. And I don't have a good way to do it, but the trauma is going to be real. But I was just saying that you agree in terms of it starts at the home. It starts with prevention programs. It starts with opportunities, because by the time police get there, they're reacting to something that already happened.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the home aspect of it, but the opportunity, I somewhat is I'm 50-50 on that, because like I say, I've been in situations and I've seen situations where you had the good kids doing their thing, and then you have the bad kids coming there and try to ruin everything. Right? There's stories of it, unfortunately. Right? So I think if the parents are the the most important underlying issue, and training their children to be good people. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand. Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm just really having a hard time hearing this because, I was one of those kids that you might call a bad apple, because I joked around in class. If you came at me, I'll fight you. You know what I mean? Like that was me as a kid. And if Mr. Fantastic was in charge where I grew up, I might be one of those ones incarcerated. But and I actually been in handcuffs 5 times, right? Like for random reasons, not even because I'm out here causing crime. For one time, I was walking home from class with my backpack, and I went to a PWI. They thought I didn't go to school there, threw me in cuffs. Another time, I was in a tuxedo leaving an event. They said, "What are you doing here?" We heard some noise complaints, threw me in cuffs. Right, like it's none of that made me a better person or made me a better leader or made me a more innocent or shift my behavior. What changed me was my coach Rogers from my basketball team, my family that wrapped around me during those hard times, my cousins down the street that showed love whenever I need some support. Like it was community that helped me become great. And it wasn't law enforcement cracking down on me. And I'm someone who went literally from rural poverty to serving as special assistant to the president of the White House. And I just think that mentality that you have that, hey, it's all just bad apples, we got to crack their heads, is really dangerous because we're giving up on so many of our young Black folks who have so much potential, but we're not even giving them a chance. We're just throwing them away before we've even done a good enough job to give them the support they need to become great. And yes, if we wait until they shoot up a party, it's too late. But all I'm saying is we can't just accept the losses. We got to pour and invest in our folks. And when we do, it works. When we do, it works. And I think I'm a living example. I imagine some other people on this screen are, or at least listening are too. And so it's just heartbreaking to hear you say that, man.
Hey man, I live in reality, unfortunately, brother. Again,
Mr. Fantastic. Let me say this before you go. I swear I used to do Greg has context, right? But Anacostia High School, right? Zoo, right? And I hate to say it like that, but I just want y'all to understand, And if you came there with me, Kelly Miller Middle School, all right, if you came there with me, you would see, and I know you would see, like, yo, it's beyond the parents. It's so much shit going on to these kids, right? And they are in these environments in which they cannot control, The kid didn't put themselves there, the parent did. We get that, But now what? Right? And you get to see the now what when you're trying to actually intervene. And I promise you would see it if you subjected yourself to the metal detector, right? It's just going through at a middle school, and then in the classroom with these kids, you could see that, yo, it's beyond their parents, and we all had somebody that was, as they climbed, lifted us up, that got us out of a jam, that gave us a pass. Right? There's times you should have been troubled, but they didn't trouble you, and then what you did with that opportunity. You know what I mean? It's so much more than what we wanted to, because it'd be easier if it was only the parents, right? But the village to raise a child thing still holds firm. And we see in the communities that we always tout, they have families and a dollar stays in their community. And it's a community that has the same prescriptions raising all the kids too. So it's a lot, but I understand what you're saying, but it's a whole lot more beyond mommy and daddy for sure. Damn, man. Hey Greg, man, I know you got to get up out of here. I appreciate you hanging out with us wholeheartedly, good brother.
Yeah, man,
thank you for the time. Yeah, go ahead. Talk your shit.
No, it's fun. I appreciate y'all, man. I appreciate y'all having me. Thanks, Hamp. Thanks, Big Aaron. Thanks, Mr. Fantastic. This was a good exchange. And look, I think the reality is like all of us are concerned about our safety, and that's really important. I think if we can just figure out ways to see the problems and see the solutions and not just keep patching band-aids, like what we're seeing right now, I think we can get out of this muck, man. And again, if folks don't believe it or don't have faith, we have real communities that are doing it. Like Baltimore's doing it, Oakland's doing it, New Jersey's doing it. Like it's happening. It's a reality that we can be young Black free, you know, and free from violence. It's not an idea or a miracle. And so I just appreciate y'all having this conversation. So happy to be here. I'm gonna keep fighting, keep pushing. Y'all can follow me at the Action Jackson on Instagram.
I dropped the link on the Instagram. I also pinned it to the top of the chat. Like I said, Greg is making actual moves, actual strides, right? He putting his money where his mouth is. You know what I mean? I've seen it in real time, right? He being humble by telling us his backstory, you know? So I'm dropping a link. I'm gonna pin it to the top of the chat as well for his Instagram. And please go follow, right? It's information. You know, we come to the internet largely for information. There's a side of the story that Greg tells consistently. You know, you get a real actual story recorded in real time picture of the police not dressed like police with a bunch of black boys sitting on the curb, right? And the imagery matters, which is why if it bleeds, it leads, right? You ever heard that for the news? You know, so similarly, just the pictures, man, it impacts you differently, especially when Greg was driving and I knew what block he was on. You know what I'm saying? So damn, man. Hey, Greg, man, I'm proud of you, bro. Keep grinding. Thank you for the conversation and the information. And hopefully in the next hour, we continue to push this conversation forward.
Thanks, man. Peace.
Be safe. Greg, yo, salute, man. Salute Greg Jackson in the building. I'm going to drop his Instagram, man. We're going to pin it to the top. Please go like, share, and subscribe to him on Instagram. I'm going to read these super chats. Let me bring my brothers up. Be safe and do the right thing, man. Like, share, subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And we out.
Closed-minded folks, you know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and don't nobody want to hear it, but it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.